Hello and welcome to the 8th episode of the NYU Students for Criminal Justice Reform. Today, Chris and Sheba join us for a follow-up on the Public Policy Symposium. So, what happened in day 2, Chris?
Well, the day got off to a rocky start, but in the end, it came together again in the second annual symposium.
What do you mean it got off to a rocky start? What was the point of conflict?
Well, the day started with border security, and given the current political platform on border security, we can understand why some people didn't agree to it. But eventually, in final negotiations, both sides came to a consensus.
Did we build the wall?
We built a fence. 2 fences, actually, a double-layered fence.
I was kind of hoping that would be a big, beautiful wall. To be perfect.
Yeah, just destroy our southern sightline.
So yesterday,
and take away property from people who live in Texas.
Of course, eminent domain.
Right.
Well, how else would we build the roads, right?
Or the libraries.
Or the pipelines.
That's true. That too.
So yesterday we were talking a little bit about immigration status. Was there any movement on sort of deciding a pathway to citizenship or amnesty?
Well, after last night, it wasn't decided until the final negotiation, and this is actually what drove the conversation the most, or drew it out the most. And so a legal status was given to all illegal immigrants in this country on Saturday. So it's a one-time amnesty program. Anyone caught coming in on Sunday, or anyone who comes in after Sunday or after the registration date passes, which wasn't truly discussed actually, would then therefore be considered an illegal immigrant again. But this bill did pass with the amendment to contingent on border security, and it was only if the border was secure. So it does truly follow the Gang of 8 approach to the immigration problem currently in this country.
And anyone who missed out on the podcast before this, just know that this is not news.
No.
Not what has actually passed through Congress, but some much more committed NYU students were willing to roll up their sleeves and make some compromises and agreements in order to get an actual immigration policy through.
So were there any surprises today?
The biggest surprise, honestly, was the amount that the Republicans were able to gain at the end of the symposium. But yes, there was a lot of big compromises, but I think what really took the cake was and we repealed Obamacare.
We need to elect some of these people, I think.
Well, I guess Mitt Romney would be sad since he's the one who wrote it, but
yeah.
If it's a state policy, then that's fine. The problem is that it's a federal policy.
Well, the problem is it's not universal health care.
Well.
Yeah.
Difference of opinion. But yeah, I think we're all in agreement that there's a lot of problems with Obamacare, and most people, what they say that 50% of people are looking for Obamacare to expand, or stay the same. So.
Or shrink.
There's only there's actually a very small percentage of people that would like it to be smaller. I think 50% want it to expand, and somewhere more like between 10 and 20% want it to actually get smaller in any way or be repealed outright.
How do you define expand, though?
That's a good question. How would you define it?
Because Trump, his whole campaign on the Medicare and healthcare front was that he was basically going to create to be extremely vague, better healthcare that covered everyone, and that there wouldn't be people dying in the streets.
Yeah, I heard it was going to be huge.
Yeah. The and to me that sounds like Medicaid expansion, which
Honestly,
Paul Ryan's plan does have as well.
that is the consensus that the Republicans, Democrats, Communists, Socialists, Students of Color, and Green Party eventually came to. It was the combining Medicare and Medicaid into a single program and applying. It's basically a government run. It's
A public
more
option.
or less a government. Yes, it's a public option rather than private options on a supported by public subsidy. But the plan that came together, and we haven't finished writing up these the official positions yet, but it was actually very concise. It was actually very short. It worked, or it should work. Nothing ever works in government, so it's kind of a stretch there. But it was a combination of Medicare and Medicaid, and they did keep certain aspects of Obamacare. Absolutely. Many of the Republicans agreed that some of the basic aspects of Obamacare, I can't even speak right now, were to like is it 26 or 23 that you can stay on your parents' plan?
26.
26, yes, that was agreed upon, and many even talked about extending it, though no agreement was reached, so therefore it stays the status quo. But it was something that I was very surprised to see all the parties come together on.
Well, if it's optional, what do we do about the fact that most people who would choose that option are probably people who would be using it more, which, as Thurston has brought up to me many times, would lead to an insurance death spiral? Is that right?
Yeah, so one of the things that, like, for example, Paul Ryan's plan does is he allows people to buy private health care, and then he uses premium support, which is basically like sort of the Cadillac tax. It's a different way to get the money, and then he funnels that into subsidizing the lower income and poor people who are on the program. Basically, what I find most interesting about a lot of these policies is sort of how, like, we seem to be converging on some topics, even though the rhetoric is diverging.
Well, unfortunately, I feel like the actual politics in this country is diverging, and that's just playing the game, trying to get ahead. But I was very happy to see that the NYU community come to a consensus on many of these issues that our government is not even close to even talking about yet. And that gave me hope. It gave me hope.
Yeah. I mean, in 2014, Paul Ryan pretty much agreed with Obama on expanding the earned income tax credit to, like, all people above age 21, and increasing the take-up rate, expanding the eligibility bracket. And I mean, then if you look at Hillary Clinton's proposal for the EITC during her campaign, you saw something very similar.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like there are policy agreements, even though, like, politically Paul Ryan and Obama could not come to the table in 2014.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that there's a certain, political currency that comes from being able to say, well, I fought him tooth and nail, even if it's something that you both agreed on.
Absolutely, especially in the House, where, I hate to say this, there is a trend going on that a lot of the politicians are being elected from the more extreme sides of the party, that it's these candidates run on the true, like, the absolute true platforms, the most left and most right, mainly most right, in order to gain the conservative vote, the true conservative vote. And that's something that was driving these two parties apart.
Now, the people in the symposium, were they reflective of sort of like where the parties are, like, in actual politics right now, or were they more kind of like kind of like this is an exercise in politics, and so let's work it out?
We actually left it up to the parties completely to determine their stance on the issues, and for the most part, I was very surprised to see that many of the major parties chose the platforms of their chose the national platform as their, or the presidential platform even, as their topics for the symposium, and that's something that so the political approach to it was, it came together as a national debate. Let's put it like that. And I was very surprised to see that many of the things that were talked about for the last 8 months to a year in the presidential campaign were still very relevant in this topic. I thought that many people would have changed platforms after the election, but it seems like they wanted to keep it somewhat realistic, even if it's not something they completely agreed in, and I think it made for a better symposium.
It's interesting.
What would it take for this to happen in real life?
Lock them in their rooms, turn off the air conditioning, maybe?
Well, I think you kept food from them.
Oh, no, that is true. We did have to resort to some measures in order to get a consensus. So yes, we did lock them in a room with us for an hour and a half and said that there is cake in the other room once these negotiations are done. So it was an incentive to get it done. Let's put it like that. Not everything was, like, the Eighth Amendment might have been violated.
So, God, I don't know whether it was in like an Onion article or an actual bill. It was years ago. Someone I may have proposed banning air conditioning in DC during session.
Can I just say I'm really afraid by the fact that you don't know whether it was an Onion article or not.
You know, at this point, most of the political headlines, I can't tell anymore.
We've gotten to that point.
So, going forward, based off this proposal that you guys hashed out, what would be the sort of disincentive for people illegally immigrating to the United States?
Well, there are going to be increased border security. And there is going, and on visas where I believe the majority of illegal immigrants are said to have come from in this country, we actually have raised the caps, but there are biometric and visa tracking programs in place to keep better tabs on the people who have them. And there was an attempt to abolish birthright citizenship, but it was not done. But so
the Cruz Amendment.
Oh, we're not going to go there. But it was something that was widely debated and was possibly one of the longer topics, even though it was slated as something that we slated it as a minor topic. And the difference is the debate time that we allow. So we allow 2 to 2.5 hours for the major and an hour to an hour and 15 minutes for the minor. That one took up nearly 2 hours, which was very surprising. And
so one of the things I'm interested about is now in our political spectrum, we don't often hear from the Green Party and the communists and the socialists.
Mm-hmm.
How did having them at the symposium change like the discourse and behavior?
Well, you are right. These parties are not exactly the most assertive in the American in American politics, but in this symposium, they really do serve the purpose as kind of. It's kind of weird how you don't notice that people agree until you put someone else in the room. And it was weird to see that the Democrats and Republicans coming together so quick and kind of forming a coalition to also have the consensus of the communists and the socialists and the Green Party. And that was something that we were very surprised to see.
It makes sense that, politics, I guess, was more civil during the Cold War. Maybe this whole Putin thing is a good thing. Maybe our politics will be more united.
It feels like the opposite of the Cold War.
The Warm War?
I think warm wars at this point would end very quickly.
It's like the hot tub war.
Yeah, exactly. Just remove the air conditioning. But especially in a lot of the debates, it was truly the communist and socialist rhetoric forcing a coalition between the Republicans, Democrats, such as what was the main one that this happened? Especially in visas, because both the Democrats and Republicans came to a pretty quick consensus that visas are a necessary measure in order to allow people in and out of this country, and a way to sort of start the ball rolling on possible citizenship. So you start off with a visa, and all this was discussed. And while the communists don't believe in visas or any process or the communists in our platform, in their platform, decided that they would not have any formal check-in or check-out processes. Once you were here, you were here. And it was very surprising, especially since Sheba was moderating the debate. It was very surprising to see the Democrats and Republicans try to come together on numbers of visas, if at all, and trying to get the communists and socialists to sign off on their agreement.
What was your take on that, Sheba?
So I am very much for a smaller government. So I was enticed by this idea of not having a visa program, and they brought up some examples from other countries on how our visa program could be smaller, which I thought was very interesting. But I think the Democrats and Republicans were very quick to say we really don't want that much of a change, and before they were even looking at these other policy ideas, it was really quick run to this is how things have always been done. So let's just stick with the very simple questions at hand. That was my take on it. But I do think that the communists came with some interesting ideas, and they stuck to their guns for a while and really explained why they had those beliefs, which I thought was great. But yeah, I think at the end it came from the Democrats and Republicans kind of getting together and saying how can we make any movement on this, with the visa program that we have in place now. And that came down to the Republicans saying, we want to have some way of, there's already biometric scanning in place, but we want to make sure that this is a database that is national and that this can be tracked no matter which port you're coming in and leaving from. And I think that word database and the words biometric were frightening to some other caucuses. So it really took a long time, actually, in that exact conversation, nothing happened. It wasn't until I think they moved rooms and they decided they would move a little bit and consider that database. And I think the Democrats, other than that, what the Democrats and Republicans both wanted was very similar, which was to enhance stimulate our economy by increasing the amount of visas that we give out. So I thought that was very interesting that I think they had different numbers and different visa programs that they were looking at, but they both wanted to increase those numbers and make it easier for people to be able to get those visas.
Now, the idea of sort of mass surveillance and keeping eyes on people with visas and stuff, that does sound, and database, those are terrifying concepts, especially given the sort of mix of militarization of the police paired with the expansion of surveillance equipment and sort of whatever happened to the Fourth Amendment.
And I do have to give a correction. the Republicans did not want to make it easier to get visas. They were willing to give out more, but but not to make it easier.
So is one of the concerns about sort of reforming the immigration system that will expand the sort of surveillance power of the state? How was that hashed out?
It wasn't framed. The communists absolutely framed it as such that it's a complete overreach of the state, and that the state has no means interfering in this aspect. But
Redistributing property and wealth, that's not an overreach.
Yeah, well, that was brought up. Trust me, we got hung up on that for a while. But it was eventually agreed upon that that this database would be maintained by the DHS and would only be referenced by organizations such as the TSA, some major border control areas where it would have access to this, and some police would in non-sanctuary cities. I think it was agreed upon. So the other 99% of the nation, land-wise.
Huh. TSA?
Yes.
Interesting.
Indeed.
So, what else? Other sort of major topics did you guys cover? Or is that about it?
What was yesterday? I'm sorry. We talked about green cards as well. Yes, but the green cards, unfortunately, mainly there was no agreement on. Well, since there was no pathway to citizenship agreed upon for these people of a legal resident status, and because there was no agreement on the visa program yet, the green cards actually kind of fell in a limbo stance, where yes, they would increase the number of green cards, but it was up to the the government to regulate. It's up to Congress basically, because although it increased, there is a cap and there is a minimum, but it's up to Congress to regulate the intermediary.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting. It's something that you learn from being in these rooms and listening to the symposium, is how much one thing depends on another thing. And that's never so simple to say, well, we all agree on this, because somebody is using that agreement for another policy, and then someone in that other who has a stake in that other policy is using their agreement on on that policy for something else. So everything ended up connected. I think you brought out one time, it was all a web.
Yep.
And you had to, but it would have been a domino effect too. And I think that's what it became when we said, okay, well, people said that it would be okay if there was a double fence. It was a domino effect. And now all of a sudden there were so many other there's an open policy window and everything was able to be passed.
And that's what was...
Sorry, continue, Chris. Fine,
that's fine.
And I feel like that's kind of what the opposite happened with the Gang of Eight, whereas an agreement results in a domino effect towards you guys coming to this proposal. I felt that the Gang of Eight, there was some poison pills that were introduced, and those had the domino effect in the other direction, just sort of making people walk away. So, I mean, yeah. Yeah, sorry, Chris.
No, in the negotiations, there were absolutely people threatening to walk out, saying that they won't agree, and it was really nice to see that a lot of these caucuses and the caucus leaders were trying to find a sweet spot in negotiating on how far they could go without causing an uproar, but making sure that they had enough in their platform to satisfy their caucus. And just a lot of caucuses were dancing around that sweet spot. And we absolutely had points where I was sitting at the table, Sheba was sitting at the table, where I was saying to myself, there's no way we are going to come to a consensus on this issue. It's better, like, we might have to like completely eliminate it, and especially on amnesty would almost destroy the entire symposium, because that would, every other decision basically relied on the amnesty debate to be settled first. And that issue was probably discussed for, out of the 2 hours of final negotiation, that was probably discussed for more than 60% of it. And it was just the tactics that people used to try to navigate the final memo in a way that they could try to compromise, but not compromise enough where it was like it was a push and pull, more or less, where it was like who has the upper hand now, and who will have it 10 minutes from now when we move on to the next issue.
So how confident are you in immigration reform at the federal level and the actual Congress in the next, I don't know, year or two?
I feel like it's an issue that's definitely going to get more attention now, and especially with I have a feeling that people are going to be keeping that people are going to keep a close eye on both the House and Congress now, and really try to see on what gets pushed through rather than ignoring them for 2 years and just checking their name off 97% of the time when they come back up on the ballot. I really hope that this election, especially for both the left and the right, pulls their attention into Congress and makes sure that they're keeping an eye on what's going on, or forcing something to go on, because either would work right now, honestly.
Yeah. And that has been something that people have spoken about, that like this election cycle has shown that we need to reassess the sort of division of powers and explore having a stronger Congress and perhaps a weaker executive. Maybe. We'll see how that works out. That may just be Paul Ryan's hopes and dreams.
Well, I think even the Obama administration showed that even with a completely divided legislature, with both the Republicans controlling the House and the Senate for the majority of the time, while the Democrats, of course, have the presidency, how much a president can get done using his executive powers. And I think that's something that's going to have to be carefully looked at over the next 4 to even 8, possibly even 8 years, and just see that and just watch the power of the executive, because that's something that has always been called into question, especially by the Republicans, unfortunately. But now I think both sides may be able to come to a consensus and change. I hate to say change the Constitution, which hasn't been done. I don't know. It's 50 years. 50. Yeah, 50 years, and now finally come to an agreement about something.
Yeah, it might be sort of trimming back the regulatory power of the executive and kind of forcing Congress to be more specific about their proposals. That would be kind of terrifying. So that's another thing. Your proposal, even if it was like, what if there was like, if you had to send it to a hypothetical president, would that have changed the dance, knowing that there was someone who might have run on no amnesty or no pathway to citizenship, how that might have changed the negotiations?
I think it would have had to, because there is no way that we could have gotten this many caucuses to come together on the issue otherwise.
Well, we'll see what happens, I guess. Thank you so much for coming again to join us, Chris, and Sheba, of course.
This was wonderful as always. I hope that in the future, the Students for Criminal Justice Reform at Wagner, at NYU Wagner, and also the NYU Politics Society can get together and maybe have more conversations like this. Or I know you also worked with us for our debate series. which was wonderful, and hopefully we can plan more of those as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, feel free to check out the Public Policy Symposium page on Facebook soon for the published memo, which will be coming out hopefully before the end of the semester.
Is there a handle for that?
Not yet, but we will be creating one in the next couple of days.
Okay. Well, before we go, I have to say it's Thurston's birthday.
Oh, is it? Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, Thurston.
If I could sing, I would do it.
Let's spare the audience. And speaking of the audience, if you guys enjoyed what you heard, please subscribe. And thank you for listening. Good night.
That'd be a great birthday present for Thurston.